Good evening, I'm Natalie Popper.
And I'm Lindsay Kohler, and we have another episode of Fun and Forensics.
Today's killer is Ed Kemper, otherwise known as the Co-Ed Killer. Today we will have Barbara Walters do an exclusive interview with Ed Kemper and his lawyer.
Hi, I'm Barbara Walters, and tonight I'm going to be interviewing Edmund Kemper and his lawyer, Robert Kardashian. Now, this is going to be a very raw and real interview, and it might get a little emotional. Let's start. I just want to start off with saying, I noticed that you don't have any handcuffs on. Can you, explain that a little bit, just so the viewers can understand the setting and the context?
I left my murdering ways in the past. I feel remorse for that. I did those actions, but this time I'm not actively going to hurt you.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that.
I am here to just be here.
Okay.
In the presence of a beautiful woman.
Thank you, Edmund. You're such a charmer. So let's just start off with how your childhood was. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was rough. It was, my mom locked me in the basement to keep me away from my sisters. It's hard on a person.
Well, as an 8-year-old child, which is when this began to happen to him, it's hard to understand when everyone else can go upstairs and you're forced in the basement. It's kind of like you're being sent to hell while everyone else can go to heaven. It's hard for a young mind to understand.
Yeah, I read that your mom even called you a real weirdo. Can you, how did that feel?
I felt rage.
Yeah.
When your mom says something like that to you, it's not a fun thing to hear. And I felt angry, and I wanted revenge on her.
Yeah, you definitely got your revenge. So can you talk about any precursors? I saw that your sister has said that you would go to your second grade teacher's house and watch her through the window with a butcher's knife. So can you talk about any other precursors? Or no, I think it was a bayonet.
She was hot, so let's just
yeah.
throw that out there.
Okay.
I used to find joy by decapitating cats and putting their heads on sticks. Some might call that a precursor. It was quite fun for me, though.
Psychologically, most serial killers begin with murder and mutilation of animals, so this sign right away should have been a warning to the family, the neighbors, but no one showed enough of an interest in Edmund and his well-being to even recognize these kind of actions.
Yeah, it said that, Edmund, you were locked in the basement, right? And it's sad to hear that rather than get you the proper help, you were just sent downstairs. Mr. Kardashian, can you comment on some of the games Edmund liked to play with his sisters?
Looking back now, I'm sure he realizes how twisted they were, but one specifically that he had mentioned in our conversations was something he called a gas chamber, where he would sit in a chair and writhe like he was dying, which he doesn't understand now why that ever seemed like a good idea, but that was one. And also the focus on death is another telltale sign of someone who will grow up to kill later in life.
Kids are gonna be kids. I understand that now, that maybe that wasn't the game to play, but let's focus on that I'm better now.
Yes, he definitely is much better. He's actually been up for parole twice, and he will be for a third time this year, but he realizes that his condition, how he is mentally, and what he had done in the past does not deem himself fit for society, and he has voluntarily stayed in incarceration, and for the safety of everyone, has decided it's best that he stay.
And I like to think of myself as a hero.
Oh, yeah, I know we really appreciate you. So, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your mom, your dad, your grandparents, anyone that you think might have impacted your life and the choices you've made?
Yeah, obviously, about my mom. She was alcoholic, she beat me. Not a good lady. My dad, busted out of there as soon as he could. Didn't even care.
I heard that he even remarried and had a new son, so I can't even imagine the impact that made, or the level of hurt that you felt.
You must feel young.
Yeah, it's tough knowing you're not good enough, especially with a mom like I had. My grandparents, on the other hand, I'm gonna have to to defer to Robert on that one. That's a little rough.
Right. His grandmother actually was the first murder he committed. He was close with his grandparents, and he was living with them for a while, but his grandmother had a problem with him killing small animals in their yard and on the property. So that fight started it, and the rage kind of built up in him and overflowed, and he ended up murdering his grandmother and what he told authorities was he killed her to see what it felt like. But he says that it was an immediate remorse kind of action, because when his grandfather did come home, the only reason he says he killed his grandfather was to save him from seeing the sight of his dead wife. And after this, he did go to prison initially. So that was his first prison sentence, and that is why those feelings are not good to surface again, why it is so hard for him to talk about.
Would you even say you kind of put your rage against your mother into your grandmother? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think I would probably say that. I mean, you know, anybody who wants to know what it feels like to kill someone, I mean, that's, you know. And I think with my mother, it just really enhanced those feelings, and I was having a lot of rage, definitely, and it kind of overcame me. And, you know, my grandmother was a woman. She was, you know, the first woman I just saw in that moment, and it kind of happened.
Yeah, there's definitely a clear underlying psychological problem if that is the reasoning for a murder like that. Obviously, there's never a reason to kill, but those feelings of rage were uncontrollable, especially his grandmother, a mother-type figure. It's easy to see where those lines could have been blurred.
Yeah. So I've noticed a pattern in your criminal history is that you tend to turn yourself in. So you did call 911 on yourself, and then you were sent to a criminally insane mental institution. Can you just kind of tell me about what your stay was like in prison? Were you diagnosed with anything? Did you receive treatment? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's kind of a blurry time in my life. You know, I just murdered my grandparents. It was in kind of a state. So, you know, I called my mom, and she turned me in, and from there it's kind of a little, you know, so I think Robert really knows that.
Yeah, in his time at the facility, he wasn't diagnosed schizophrenic. And from there, they went to release him, but because he had become a model prisoner, he really turned himself around in prison, or so they thought. And when they went to release him, he tried to refuse. He wanted to stay. He didn't feel like he could handle the real world at the time, but they went against his wishes and did release him, which unfortunately was the beginning of his spree of murders.
And I don't want to emotionally trigger you, Edmund, but you've said that while you were a model prisoner, they were having you administer psychological tests to other prisoners because you were such a good prisoner. And while you were doing that, you said that's kind of how you learned to trick psychologists. And you even said that the rapists that you would assess taught you a lot about how you should really kill the girl you rape after so that you don't have any witnesses. Can you just kind of like talk about that? Like, is there remorse for you? Do you remember saying these things?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it happening. I mean, you know, these people, there's a lot to learn from rapists. Maybe, you know, I shouldn't have listened so intently, but like I said, at that time I was not in a good place. So hearing these people tell me these things and give me ways to, you know, carry out these like desires that I had to hurt people really like goaded me on. And once I got out, which I advised against, all those thoughts were just kind of like coming at me, and then I knew exactly what to do when the situations of the murders presented themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, even this job specifically, giving him thinking that it was turning him around and helping him, might have really sparked why he could have continued these murders for so long without getting caught.
Your record was expunged of your juvenile crimes. Can you talk about your adult life? did you go to school? Did you have a job? Can you just kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, so never went to high school. I went to community college for a little bit. Did not graduate, but I mean, despite my lack of school, I never really felt like I was behind or slower than the rest. I felt a little socially inept, but not school-wise.
Yeah, he actually has an IQ of 145, so he's incredibly intelligent, but his mental state and physical state, meaning he's 6'9", so he does kind of stand out in a crowd. He could never really fit in too well.
Okay. So, did you have a job or?
So I tried to become a cop. Did not work out. Not
Because
really
of
sure
your
why.
height, or?
Just, yeah, you know, things like that.
Height and the mental stability exams.
Yeah. And then I had a job in, like, public transportation.
Okay. So you picked up about 100 hitchhikers, the college girls that you would find on the road, before you actually killed any of them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, in those 2 years when I got out and before I made my first kill, there was a lot of rage inside of me, and it was just kind of building up and building up. And then, you know, I even kept tools to kill in my trunk. Like, I was ready for my breaking point, and when I hit that breaking point, I think there were 6 just random college girls that, you know, were just unlucky that day, and I killed them. Random girls, you know?
So, you've talked about 8. I've only had that you've killed 8 people. Who were the last 2? Because it says that you've killed 10 people.
Well, the last 2, kind of hard for him to talk about. The last 2 were his mother and her best friend. All the murders kind of had led up to this. His mother was the source of the rage and the struggle that he felt from the time he was a young kid, and it really all just led up to her murder. Even though he did kill his mother before her best friend, but that was kind of a collateral damage situation.
And once that had happened, you turned yourself in.
Well, he did go to the police, but they refused to believe him. He had a lot of buddies at the police station, but they refused to believe that he could kill.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Fun and Forensics. I'm Natalie Popper.
And I'm Lindsay Kohler.
Good evening.
Good evening.